Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row. Thanks so much for listening to the following broadcast, courtesy of Public House Media.
Hi, this is Emily.
This is Lindsay.
And this is Elizabeth,
co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Once you are done with this episode, we hope you'll come check out our show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk nerdy to you about fandoms, fan fiction, and all pop culture for nerds that you can think of. A new show comes out every Friday.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Today we're going to talk about the MLS playoffs and what's going on here locally. And we're going to talk about El Clasico and the aftermath from that game.
Your Soccer Passport is sponsored by Squadcast. As podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from around the world, being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files, then uploaded to the host computer, allowing some really good audio quality. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. All right, let's go straight into this MLS playoffs. The bracket is set. There was some drama going into it. Let's just read off who is in what spot, starting first with the East. In the knockout round, New York City FC is the 3 seed. They'll face Philadelphia in the 6th slot. DC United continues their massive run, going all the way up to the 4th seed. They'll go up against the Columbus Crew in the 5th spot. That means Montreal's knocked out, as the New York Red Bulls and Atlanta are 1-2 in the East. In the West, Sporting Kansas City ended up taking that title. Seattle is number 2. LAFC is the 3rd spot. They'll be facing off against Real Salt Lake in the knockout round. And your 4-5 matchup will be FC Dallas against Portland. So there's lots of things to talk about. I think in the West, the big one to talk about is who is not there, namely Zlatan Ibrahimovic and his LA Galaxy, who looked like they should have been in this playoffs until the LA Galaxy did what the LA Galaxy typically does.
Yeah, I mean, they're up 2-0 in the first 30 minutes. Things are going well, and then all of a sudden they do, like you said, what they've been doing all year, just not living up to expectations, playing pretty poorly, and they end up losing 3-2 and miss the playoffs. I don't think Zlatan is – we mentioned Zlatan, I think, a little bit last week about – I think he's been – playing really well this year for the Galaxy, and it's not on him. I think the two big culprits of it are the Dos Santos brothers, who've been just terrible this year for the Galaxy. I mean, they're the ones who are supposed to help Zlatan this year, and then they're the ones looking like 36-year-olds. Zlatan's are the one looking like he was in his prime for the Galaxy. But yeah, just something what you were not expecting, and if you're a Galaxy fan, what you weren't hoping not make the playoffs, especially when you have the new kids on the block and your rivals in LAFC coming in and getting a 3rd seed and making the playoffs. And now if you're Galaxy, you have a lot of questions you have to answer about yourselves entering the offseason, especially when you have LAFC taking all the thunder right now from you in the soccer in Los Angeles, adding all the other teams that are going on in LA. Galaxy falling behind not just this season, but maybe in the future to come.
And it may be even more difficult. And it's probably even more difficult now, especially with Ibrahimovic probably being the big, mid-season signing in the free agency window, either in the EPL or La Liga, trying to help out some teams with some instant scoring offense that he'll be able to bring. And he's got this big game stuff, and that big game stuff was what really kept LA Galaxy in this the entire time. But I do find it really really exciting because that spot now goes to Real Salt Lake, who's going up against LA, the LAFC. And so you could have this great first round matchup, 3 seed versus 6 seed as an LA derby, and it just didn't happen, which I think makes us all kind of a little sad. But it also shows that, man, is there a lot of teams limping into that knockout game between LAFC and Real Salt Lake. LAFC could have had a first round bye, but they ended up losing to Sporting Kansas City. It was what gave Sporting KC that initial jump up to be that top spot. So you've got all these things right now that are not necessarily doing what you need them to do for LA, but Real Salt Lake barely got in either. You can even make the argument that they did not get in on their own merits because of how bad LA Galaxy, stumbled to the finish line. That 6th spot is the exact opposite of what's happening in the East right now, where you've had so many teams really push at the end of the season. And in the West, you've got the exact opposite. And I'm not really sure what to expect out of that. But out of all the potential matchups in this knockout round in either conference, LAFC versus Real Salt Lake is definitely not what anybody wanted to see.
Yeah, and I'm on the West side. What was interesting was yesterday, where 3 teams that were already out of the playoffs had no chance. Their seasons were not what they wanted. Houston Dynamo, Colorado Rapids, and the Vancouver Whitecaps all took out teams who are in the playoffs and all took out teams who wanted to win to help their positions. Colorado beat FC away 2-1. Vancouver got a Cascadia win over Portland 2-1. And we just talked about Houston beating LA 3-2. And they all beat teams who needed to win, who needed results, and who wanted results to help their cause. And I think that just shows how teams are limping in. And big ups to those teams, too, who were already out, had nothing to play for. They could already be playing their vacation, and they went in and got a result in the last game to send their fans happy. But, yeah, a lot of teams limping in and some teams limping out, too, like LA. But teams limping in, too, like we talk about LA. The other LA team, Real Salt Lake, their last game was a 3-0 beating from the Timbers. Timbers losing last game of the season. I think the only team who won this weekend entering the playoffs on the West is Seattle and Sporting Kansas City, and everybody else lost getting in. So really interesting on the West side. But that's kind of what we talked about a couple weeks ago, how the West is not as spread out and not as kind of formality the way the East is, and this is kind of what we expected, I guess, in a way, the craziness of the West.
And there are some other aspects to that. I mean, Houston did a really good job in the Open Cup this year, so like they've shown that they've been able to situationally step up. They're kind of like the Dayton Flyers of the MLS right now. But the other thing, too, is that Portland lost a rivalry game, to Vancouver in the Cascadia Cup. So, like, there's a little bit of a different aspect with those 2 games compared to others moving in. And it is awkward because all 4 teams from the West lost going into this knockout stage. One of them's going to have to win before they go up against the 2 teams that did win that got the bye. So, like in the end game of this isn't necessarily as bad of a possibility as it could be. It's not like on the other side in the East, where the East is a completely different animal. Let's jump over to that side. I think instead of talking about the knockout stage, which was the big one, it was the other 2 teams, the ones that were already destined to get a bye in New York City, Red Bulls, and Atlanta. And Atlanta lost huge, 4-1 to Toronto. Toronto, again, also not having that playoff hope this year, with Montreal struggling down the end and DC United coming up so fast. No Canadian teams making the playoffs for the first time, I think, ever since we've had this many Canadian teams in the MLS. So it's a very interesting situation on the East. What sticks out to you most in the Eastern Conference?
I think it definitely was that Atlanta loss, 4-1 at home. I think Toronto, we can all agree, really underachieved this year, and maybe this is the Toronto we all hoped we would see this year, and just so happened to come out in the last game of the season. But for Atlanta, for what everything's been going so well, for them to kind of just fold in the last game of the season with the supporting field with the supporting shield on the line like that. That's kind of a big disappointment, and that's kind of a little worrying some too if you're an Atlanta fan. I think we're going to get to this later, but um, not something you want to see with the news coming out last week that Tata Martinez is already leaving at the end of the season too. So now you're wondering, if you're an Atlanta fan, if the rumblings of him leaving has unsettled the team. But for that, I think is the biggest news. But also, we have to give the Red Bulls credit. We talk about a lot of the teams in the MLS, LAFC, even the other New York team, Atlanta, and all the things they do. And we talk about the Cascadia teams and their fan base and what they bring. And we don't really talk about the New York Red Bulls, but just one of the most consistent clubs, maybe the most consistent club in MLS. They're the best team in the MLS this year, win the supporting shield. They don't have a huge fan base. They don't bring out that rawness that you see from other teams, but just level consistency year in, year out, and they're back in it again. Supporting shield, best team of the season in MLS. I think that's something we have to tip our hats to. 71 points. And yeah, just a fantastic year for them. And I think that's something that we have to acknowledge and recognize too.
Let's not forget that this is the team that set the all-time MLS record for most points in a season. This is a good squad. This is very, very much like the St. Louis Cardinals in baseball. You kind of forget that year in and year out that they are always in the hunt. Whether they are ultimately in it at the end of the year is kind of deceiving, because they're always in the hunt. They were always in the playoff hunt, and you needed a playoff in the NL Central this year between the Brewers and Cubs. You kind of forgot how good St. Louis Cardinals were, which was the first team out of the playoff hunt. You have that same situation with the Red Bulls, because there are people that are, that don't like the name brand placement as a sponsor. They don't like the weird aspects of where they're at in the city compared to NYCFC, and you kind of get that almost like Mets offcast compared to the Yankees in terms of Red Bull versus NYCFC. But this is a solid team. The other side of that is that Atlanta should be a lot more solid, and they're already self-destructing. And it's frustrating, because before you dealt with Tata Martinez, you also had Miguel Almiron, that was rumored and pretty much a done deal to be jumping over to the EPL here pretty soon. So you've got multiple people pulling these teams apart. And before it was those guys, it was Joseph Martinez, and whether or not he would be pulled away. Now, Arthur Blank, the owner of that team, has shown that they're going to make sure that these are players that will stay around for as long as they can possibly hold on to them. But there's just so much drama with Atlanta right now that it's self-destructing before it gets to a point where you can truly appreciate what this essentially expansion team has done. This is an amazing feat that so many people do not necessarily realize, that you have all of this in 1 year. You have one of the best supporting scorers in Almiron. You have the guy who won the Golden Boot and set the goals record with weeks to go. You've got a team that limped in, and honestly, if they would have won their game, they would be the team that would have the most points all time as an expansion team. This is, it's very Las Vegas Golden Knights-esque. For all the people that are excited about expansion teams and other sports, this is a team that you should still be paying attention to. And right now, there is just no good momentum, it seems, despite all the good that Atlanta's had so far.
And yeah, I think that is the other side of the coin of having those 2 years of success that Atlanta's had, is now you have teams looking from outside, looking at your players. You have, a coach who kind of feels he's done everything he's good in these 2 years to kind of take a team to a level. Can he reach more? Can he do more? Kind of things of that nature. And this is the other side of having all that success. So short and so early, you're going to have teams looking at you, teams wanting your players from outside the MLS. And now they have to bounce back, because the teams in the East are catching momentum too. I mean, the team I really like, what Wayne Rooney has done with DC United is incredible, and it's something we should talk about. We talked about a little bit a couple of weeks ago, but we got to talk about it again. They drew at, I believe, this weekend, but I mean, we're talking about how they could squeeze into a 5 or 6 seed. They're hosting the wild card game. They're a 4 seed, so I mean, what he's been able to do with the bag of bones at DC United is incredible, and just how he's been able to just kind of be refreshed coming into this league. And just,
Bag of bones is a little insulting when you also have Kellen Acosta on that team and some of
they
the
were
other strikers that
terrible
they have.
before he showed up. They were atrocious.
Well, I mean,
So,
and that's fine because they were the worst in there, but they didn't have a true top striker, and that's what they've been able to get now by repositioning things. It's not that this was a bag of bones. This was a group that was not coached properly because they didn't have the missing piece. We see this in other sports all the time. You have coaches that are absolute garbage if they don't have a decent center. You have coaches that are absolutely garbage if they don't have a good quarterback. Well, that's exactly what's happened in DC. You finally get a good forward-thinking striker that has some experience underneath his belt. And look, DC United's good again. You know, it's more than just one player's influence. It's one person flipping the team over and putting the apples back on the apple cart, because that's what needed to be fixed in DC. It was the team being held back by having a key piece not being there. And now all these other players, all these other people with skill and talent can actually show what they've got, because there's no way that Rooney by himself fixes this on his own. And there is tons that Rooney has done. You don't want to take away from Rooney's talent and what he's been able to do. But you can't just say it's bag of bones. We're not talking about LA Galaxy. We're not talking about Minnesota United. We're talking about DC, a team that, if given the right person, can make stuff happen. And everybody has improved now that he is there. They needed his leadership just as much as they needed his actual skill set. And that is something that Zlatan Ibrahimovic did not bring to LA Galaxy, and which is why DC is in the playoffs and LA is not. So, like, there's a lot of interesting aspects on this with designated players, with leadership expectations, with coaching ability that is not being brought up and is a way, way longer discussion I think that we have for this opening segment. But Wayne Rooney has done an amazing job of doing what's expected of Wayne Rooney, which also includes leadership abilities to make other players better around him. And I do think that now having something to fight for all those American team players that are on the U.S. men's national team that overlap with DC United, they now have something to play for. They're out of their rut.
Yeah, and they do have a good group of players before Wayne Rooney showed up. You mentioned Acosta. You got Bill Hammond in goal, Steve Rome, who's gotten a couple of call-ups as well, Pariola. So they do have good players, and they're the ones with the most momentum. So if there's a team in the wild card section that could, if we want to talk about not looking into the wild card matchups, who could make a run in this cup, I think on the East, I'm going to go with DC United. They match up hosting Columbus. New York City FC will match up against the Union. On the other side, FC Dallas hosts Portland, LAFC hosts Real Salt Lake, and these wildcard games are just one-off, so the higher seed hosts. There's no return leg. Out of those teams, who can make a run? I like DC United from the East. From the West, I'm going to be a homer and just say I like Portland. But I mean, those are what I would say if we're looking to the future, into the wild. Those are the two I like.
There's so much there. I'm not really sure how to look at it. I'm going to pick LAFC. I think that Real Salt Lake just does not have the over-the-top aspects to really make sure that they've got a consistent enough product. I mean, any game can happen. I think that does necessarily help build up a team like Real Salt Lake, but they're not the ones that we should be paying attention to in that matchup. LAFC has way too much to go for, and I do like Bob Bradley continuing his run this year with that team to go past this round. I don't know. I mean, Dallas versus Portland is a real good toss-up game. I think it could go either way. I'm going to go with Dallas still in this case, just so that way we can have some differing opinion, and I can just have all of your Portland fans hate me some more. On the Eastern side, I'm going to go with Philadelphia upset. I'm going to go with the upset here. I think Philadelphia has shown that they start from the back and move forward, which is something that is not good for NYCFC. They want high-scoring games where they can kind of go off and just go back and forth with the pitch, and I don't think Philadelphia is going to allow them to play that game. NYCFC probably would beat most of the teams that are in the knockout stage, but this was the worst potential matchup for them going up against Philadelphia, and I think it's going to burn them. And I think DC United is going to win, and I hope they do it in a way that is like dramatic, because I'm pretty sure that like the next day is when Greg Berhalter is going to be named the U.S. men's national team coach. So it would be nice if there was like a dramatic pause before the continued conspiracy theory is set up. Because, you know, either way, whether you have it or if there's like a surprise with either FC Dallas or Sporting Kansas City, and one of those guys get it, even though that neither of them both of them have confirmed that they've not gotten an interview. It does continue the conspiracy theory about the next manager of the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah, I think to finish my results, I'm with you on New York. Oh, actually, I'm going New York FC over Philadelphia. I like DC United, like I mentioned, over Columbus. But shout out for the crew to keeping their team. But I think it's going to end with Wayne Rooney, Portland, and yeah, I like LAFC. I think LAFC is one if the two teams from the wild card to make it out of the West. I think it's going to be LAFC who can do it. But yeah, I like LAFC too. So that's where we're at there. And yeah, I'll take Greg Berhalter to take the U.S. national team for 500 too.
All right. On that note, we will take a break. Worldwide Headlines is next. Then we will talk about El Clasico and just double check if the inevitable happened while we were recording that segment. You're listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media, sponsored by Squadcast.fm. Now time for Worldwide Headlines here on Your Soccer Passport, a look at other major news from around the soccer world. Leicester City has confirmed the death of chairman Vikai Srivanaprabha after his helicopter crashed outside of the stadium on Saturday. More than an hour after the club drew against West Ham, his helicopter took off from the center of the stadium's pitch, cleared the stands, and then crashed seconds later. 4 other people also died in the accident. Srivanaprabha is most likely known for his compassion and his kindness. He was known for sharing free beer and hot dogs on his birthday for the team's fans. He's also the guy who led the team to their only Premier League title in 2016 after he purchased the team in 2010 for £39 million. The German Football Association is investigating the fans at Borussia Dortmund after their game with Hertha Berlin. The fans were accused of throwing bottles, and mass violence erupted. 45 people were injured in the game, including 35 of them after pepper spray was used on the crowd. No word so far on how the punishment will be discerned for either team. And finally, the former national coach of the Algerian national men's team is accusing the African Soccer Federation of match fixing. Rabah Sadan told Echo Rock TV that the 2010 CAN semifinal game was rigged to lose after his team lost 4-0 to Egypt. Algeria had previously qualified for the World Cup during that year, while Egypt did not qualify at all and needed the tournament win to get in. 2010 was the year that Landon Donovan ended up having his miracle 1-0 goal differential be the difference against Algeria to get them out of group stage. Your soccer headlines here on Your Soccer Passport are brought to you by the Public House Media Store Envy online shop. The best way to promote Your Soccer Passport and any other PHM shows is with t-shirts, mugs, and more, all available in the Store Envy shop. Visit publichousemedia.storeenvy.com. That's STORENVY.com. Stay tuned. We're going to be coming back with La Liga talk up next here on Your Soccer Passport, sponsored by Squadcast.fm.
Allison is perfect. I mean, she'd never tell you that. She's perfect. Allison, wait, are you texting and driving? Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hello and welcome back to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. I'm Brice Burge. Ivan Sanchez Carrasco also here as well. got some interesting talk after all those inside jokes of not talking about La Liga until Real Madrid scored. Now we talk about Real Madrid when they score once in a game and then get blown out in every other aspect of it, including El Clasico this year, where they embarrassed themselves once again in a tune of 5-1 loss, including a hat trick for Mr. Smiley himself, Luis Suarez. So there's a lot of things here, almost none of them good for Madrid, with the exception of the goal at the 50th minute by Vieira, who looked like there may have been a slight chance of something coming back into play for Real Madrid, only to allow 3 goals in a span of 12 minutes between 75th minute and the 87th minute, completely wrapping this one up. What were your thoughts on this game, Ivan?
From a Real Madrid fan aspect, not good. As a just a spectator of sport, I mean, hats off to Barcelona. They were pretty fantastic. If we're going to talk about how bad Real Madrid were, the first 3 minutes were atrocious. Varane continues to struggle in the center defense, which is just, we haven't seen a spell this bad from him, I don't think, ever for Real Madrid. You're talking about, now World Cup winner. He has captain. He's now one of the captains of Real Madrid, I believe. I think the third or fourth. He's been just a level of consistency that, from a young age at Real Madrid, for him just continue to play so poorly, it's just, it's like fascinating in a way because you don't know why it's happening. You have to, and it just kind of it kind of just seems that Lopetegui has kind of lost the team completely because they're just continue to make little dumb mistakes that just, part of it has to be the players have to take responsibility for it, but part of it has to be the coach too.
Those mental mistakes are so huge in this, and it shows in the stat line too. Real Madrid had more shots in this game. They outshot Barcelona 15-13. The problem is that they had less than half of those on goal, only 4 of them on goal, while Barcelona had 8. You doubled the offsides. You had half of the corners. Your possession was lower. Your pass accuracy was slightly lower, but it's not, typically that 85% is what your pass accuracy should be for an upper level La Liga program, and they were just below that Mendoza line of sorts. They just weren't there. They were on autopilot. They were like in a haze the entire time that they were out there, just making stupid mistakes once again.
Yeah, there was a good little right after the halftime. They kind of changed their formation from a 4-3-3 to a 3-5-2, which helped them, and that's where that's where Marcelo was able to get his goal. And you kind of saw that in that 20-minute period, they were playing pretty well, and they were creating some decent chances. Modric hits the post like right when it's 2-1, about the 50-something minute. That could have brought it back 2-2, and that could have changed the whole complexity from the game. But that first half, they were so poor. And I mean, they were just completely lost. And then after the third goal, where Luis Suarez just gets a head on it from 16 yards out, kind of glides it back in the upper V. Really fantastic goal. They kind of fell apart again, and they resorted a lot to a lot of half shots, a lot of shots from outside the box, a lot of shots kind of like gave Ter Stegen plenty of time in goal to see it. They were struggling to really create and break down the Barcelona defense. And I mean, this is now 4 losses in 5 La Liga games for them, and it's really starting to fall apart for them. And the manner in which it fell apart is just, spectacularly terrible, I think, which is the biggest problem. And it just kind of shows how this game is. You're kind of you're second best for most of the game, and then you have this moment, 50-something minute, you hit the post, you have momentum, and then all of a sudden it gets taken away from you, and all of a sudden it all falls back again. And kind of, you expect that from other teams. That shouldn't be Real Madrid. Real Madrid should not be. They're too good for them to restore to having to take this 20-minute section to save a game. They should be within the game, going back and forth, taking 10 minutes of a game to have their style. They might be pushed back 10 minutes, but they're able to respond for another 10 minutes or so. And that's something that has not been happening for Real Madrid, and it did happen in this game. They were dominated for about 70 minutes of it, and their 20-minute window is where they got their goal, and is when they had their chance to tie it, and they didn't. and then from there it fell apart again.
This isn't just this game. This is how this entire season has been. They've been able to really play, and that window has been wider. It's sometimes been like the first half, but there have been lots of reports, including one, while it's not official at time of recording, we actually pushed back the recording date specifically to see if we could get this news in before we had to record and send it off to editors, is that Lopetegui is not yet officially fired as of time of recording. The Irish Times, which is kind of like the TMZ of the soccer world that jumps out to a lot of rumor mongering beforehand, does say that it's a set deal. They are the only ones to do so at this time, saying that former Chelsea manager Antonio Conte will take over. I think that is the main reason why nobody else has been reporting it. It's not so much that Lopetegui is still in, so much as who is going to replace him. That is kind of the big question mark at this time. Antonio Conte was the former Chelsea manager. He's got some good resume building aspects to him. But at the same time, this is the worst start by any Real Madrid coach in the last 70 years. And Florentino Perez, the club president, is happy to make any necessary cuts that he needs to make, including one at the manager position, especially for a manager who has been so controversial since showing up.
Yeah, and as you said, we kind of held back recording to see. We both talked about this last night when we kind of did our pre-show thing, that we both expected to wake up this morning and him be fired. The Spanish paper Marca even said that after the game he said bye to his players because he was expecting to be fired. And essentially at this point kind of seems he's like a lame duck. There's reports that maybe Conte might not want it because he feels his style might not fit this Real Madrid team, and it just might be too abrasive, and it might be too much for this team. It kind of looks like their second team coach, Santiago Solari, who used to play for them as well, might be the one to take over for, if not a full-time, maybe just part-time, at least interim style. But that kind of looks like it might be what they might do, which is something they did when they fired Rafael Benitez. They went with Zinedine Zidane, who was coaching their second team. So that might be a route they're going for. But the thing is, there's just not a lot of coaches right now to get, and they're kind of in this murky water situation where they can't get a player. They can't get a world-class player now for the most part during the January transfer window. They can't. There's not a lot of coaches out there to get who are free. Conte probably is the biggest name, and his style is not a soothing one. It is very abrasive. It is very intense, and that works great when you're getting a team during the summer and you have all summer to work with them, and you can drill your ideas and you can drill what you want to do to them and make them suffer that way. But you can't do that halfway through the season. That's the kind of thing about it.
The thing is about that, though, is that that's not necessarily what Florentino Perez cares about. Perez has shown that he is willing to be a jerk if he thinks it's in the best aspect of the club. And instead of going out, and we talk about this with players all the time, you sign a player and then send them out on loan to a lesser league, but you keep their rights. There's a possibility that Conte could be brought in just specifically to prevent him from going anywhere else. And then you scrap everything. You maybe try to bring in Zlatan Ibrahimovic as a way to soothe the pain in the transfer window in January, and then just kind of move along from that aspect, because your season at 4-4-2 or 4-2-4 is pretty much already destined to be pretty far out, especially when you're this far behind your rival Barcelona and you've got problems with other injuries and players not playing up to expectations and not having a manager. It's frustrating. Do you bring in a coach like that specifically to maintain him in future usage like you do with players? I think that's kind of the big question right now.
I mean, I think he'll be there next summer if you want to go that direction. So I guess you could bring him in and see how he does, how he turns around this season. And the problem is they're smack dab in the middle of where they're playing a lot of games. They still have the second half of their Champions League group stage games to play. They're now starting Copa del Rey this week, which they play tomorrow or Wednesday. Yeah, tomorrow when this comes out. They have another La Liga game the weekend. They're playing a lot of games, and it's like this is the worst time to have to fire a coach. But at the same time, it's not getting any better. This is really like the straw that probably broke the camel's back. Lubagani was kind of holding on by a thread entering this weekend, and he needed this result, and now he didn't. Now he's 7 points back. The Real Madrid is 9th, so it's starting to look so bad. And the only positive thing you can look about this is that they're only 7 points back. For example, Everton, who's 9th in the EPL, they're 11 points back from first place. So it just kind of shows you that La Liga is still a tight race, and so if that's your hope that they can make it up somehow, and you're Real Madrid, and if you can start rolling and getting results, but I've been saying this now for a couple of weeks, and they're proving me wrong every week. So you got to change something, because insanity is just repeating the same thing over and over and expecting the results, and they're doing the same thing over and over, and they're getting the same results, which are defeats and draws and bad defeats to teams they shouldn't, or results that they should be doing better. So I mean. And the only thing you can do is fire your coach at this point. You can't bring in new players. You can't change the roster. This is like the only thing you can do is replace your coach. And the thing is, there's not a lot of options for replacing him too at this point.
You try and hope that you've got enough players to do something where even if you're bringing in your B team 100% of the time, it's kind of like in football. Your backup quarterback and your last wide receiver on the roster is going to have an amazing chemistry when they play with each other. So you can kind of hope that they work out in that way. But as you said, La Liga is weird. Girona was down a man and they still won against Valencia. There was a number of draws. I mean, the only real good win, with the exception of Barcelona over Madrid, was probably Atletico over Sociedad, which was a 2-0 win. Everything else is still just a jumbled giant mess in terms of the table. There was also the additional blow against La Liga in terms of FIFA coming out and saying that they did not like the fact that there was going to be an official La Liga game in the U.S., but seeing that the Spanish Soccer Federation was the one that asked for that, there's mixed results on whether or not they actually kind of came into a good thing or a bad thing. It's just additional noise. One of the reasons why La Liga struggles to come along in Western Hemisphere markets, even in South America, they're struggling right now to get any kind of respect because it's just unrefined noise. It's such a raw product that when you look at either some lower leagues, what the MLS is bringing to the table right now, what the Chinese Super League is doing, those fifth-tier leagues, behind or even Serie A right now in Italy right now, there are so many other leagues that seem to have their act together that La Liga doesn't. And this only adds that fire that makes this league struggle a little bit more.
Yeah, actually, I don't think the ruling by FIFA making them play a league game in Spain is it's probably a good thing. I thought that was kind of a dumb idea to play an official game away from Spain, La Liga, and play it in the United States. I get why they want to do it, but I don't think that in the long run it's a good idea for the fans and for everything like that. But I think the idea is good.
But to be fair, the other aspect of that is that it's coming out now when Messi's injured. Real Madrid is in complete gutter trash. Yeah, it's just not in a situation that's good for it right now. You have the Catalonia mix-up right now too, because you have you have Catalonia trying to get independence from Spain, and both of the teams in the U.S. game that are scheduled are from that region. So like there's just so many like other aspects to that. To have it brought up now is when you bring it up. Your timing is off. We get at the U.S. men's the U.S. Soccer Federation for how they're handling the U.S. men's national team coach. I think we should be getting at the Spanish Federation for how they're handling this with now just as vigorously as we are with the U.S. Soccer Federation. Now is not the time.
Yeah, I guess the problem is if you can't do it now, when are you going to do it? And that's kind of where we are with Real Madrid. So, for example, for Real Madrid and why, just getting back to that, because we were talking about, if you're going to change coaches, when can you do it or how are you going to do it? They play 4 games in starting the 31st in 12 days. They have 4 games to play. They have 2 La Liga games. They have a Champions League game, and they have a Copa del Rey game, all by Sunday the 11th. So, there's no time to really change a coach. That's the problem too, because then they got to play a game in 2 days, then they got to rest, play another game in 2-3 days. So yeah, the timing right now is so terrible for everything for La Liga. Their best player is hurt. They're one of their 2 most popular teams that are kind of given everything for them to succeed is mid-table, and their ideas of trying to expand have just been knocked down by FIFA. So a lot of things going on in La Liga that aren't going well, and it's all kind of just spearheaded by this kind of dumpster fire that is Real Madrid right now.
You say the only thing that Real Madrid can do is change their coach, but there's not a good time for it. Barcelona still seems to be on top. They're on top of the table right now. Atletico is kind of there. There's a lot of teams that are kind of there. Alaves, Sevilla.
Alves is second. Alves is only a point behind Barcelona. What world do we live in? Alves is 20
Sevilla and Madrid is only 2. And Espanyol is in 5th, 3 points back. It's just that's a game. Like there's 5 teams within a game of each other at the top of the league at this point in the season. We're a quarter of the way done. It's just a question of is anarchy going to continue to reign supreme this year in La Liga? And I'm not sure, because Alves looks decent. They look solid. They're kind of that New York Red Bulls aspect where they just continue to be doing what they do well consistently. Sevilla's in the same spot where they've only drawn 1 game. They've had a little bit of a higher expectation of going out there and putting up at least 2 goals up every game, and that seemed to be good given their defensive strategy. But then you keep kind of going back down, and you get like a team that's like Atletico, where it's just like, we're going to draw, fight for the draw, just fight for the draw, beat the teams that suck, and then just kind of continue to be up there. And that's not a sustainable model for further down the line. You're going to have to beat teams that are good. You just can't draw against them. And I'm not sure if Atletico Madrid is going to be there as high when you get some of the teams that are just completely off the wall, like a Levante or something like that, further down the line during the season.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it. Sevilla only 1 draw. Everybody else with more than 1 draw. Atletico 4 draws. Barcelona, Alvarez, and Sevilla all with 6 wins. It's a topsy-turvy La Liga season. So I think that if you are going back to where we started this with Real, if you're looking for positives, that it's been crazy enough so far that if you can ride the ship, you can get yourself back into at least fighting for the Champions League spot and getting yourself back in that mix. And, you kind of start chipping away that way if you want to start thinking positively and how you do it. But yeah, we even talked about, you mentioned Espanyol a little bit. Valladolid right behind them, only 2 points behind. And, at some point the season stops going from early season to now you're in the mid-season, and now kind of everything starts writing out and you kind of start seeing where your season is going. And we're about a couple of games away from that happening, where this is no longer an accident. This is kind of like what your team is. And they're very dangerous for some teams to start, like especially Real Madrid, where you are just kind of, can you get out of the mud hole that is mediocrity? Because right now they're not.
And there are a couple of teams that I want to point out. Valencia and Atletico Bilbao are 1-8-1 and 1-7-2.
Yeah, talking about mediocrity.
They are down. Yeah, so if you're talking about mediocrity, there are 2 levels of mediocrity. There's mediocrity where you're like 4-4-4, and then there's mediocrity where you're like drawing every game no matter who is put in front of you, which I think is awkward, because if you start beating up on the other teams down low, all of a sudden, if you're talking about teams that can just instantly appear later on in the season, you have to look at teams that are currently ranked 14th and 16th with 11 points because they've got 8 draws and they don't know how to lose.
And yeah, I think it's important for those who don't follow La Liga to know and realize that like Valencia are, usually one of the high upper echelon teams of La Liga, not Real Madrid or Barcelona or Atletico level, but they're usually, one of those teams fighting for that 4th spot. Atletico Bilbao as well, a very, one of those 5, 6, 7 teams in La Liga. So for them to be where they are now, it's also talking about mediocrity and disappointing, but it's also, I think if they're probably the mentality of Real Madrid is like, yo, we can just kind of turn this around a little bit where it can be right back in it and they can start getting some results they're not expecting. Valencia's a Champions League team. Let's not forget, they are in the Champions League.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're talking about teams that can turn things around, I think that compared to Real Madrid, they're in a lot better spot. It doesn't show it on the table, but they're in a good spot right now in terms of being able to take control of their own destiny because they've at least ground out a respectable finish that can help them out because they're not in a bad spot necessarily with goal differential either.
Yeah,
those are the aspects.
And it's also like what you expect from them, right? Because what our ceiling of what we expect from Madrid is so much higher than what we expect from Valencia. So to Valencia to get back to what we expect from them, it's lower than what we expect Real Madrid to where we expect from them to get. So when you think of it that regard, yes, and there are expectations for both teams. Again, Valencia is a Champions League team. I believe they just drew Man United in England, not this round, but the round before. So this is a team with quality. This is a team who is used to European soccer, and they're 14th right now in La Liga. So it just, we mentioned it, I think, last week when we started to mention about La Liga, how weird the season is. And it's probably a good thing we didn't talk about it when we wanted to before Real Madrid stopped scoring, because it just has gotten more and more unique and bizarre, and has gotten just kind of, it's expanded to what when we even thought about what it is right now, 10 games in. So, I mean, yeah, La Liga, keep an eye on it, guys. It is crazy. It's drama filled. It is high it's crazy. I don't know. It's been fun to watch if you're not a Real Madrid fan. So it hasn't been that much fun for me.
Well, as a person that hates dynasties and a person that loves just anarchy in the sporting world, I might have to start paying attention.
I mean, yeah, this is the 3-time in a row defending Champions League winners who are in 9th right now, who have lost 4 out of the last 5. I mean, it is like Lupageni cannot be that bad of a coach. He just sent the team that's won 4 of the last 5 Champions League trophies 9th in La Liga, and they just cannot. I mean, they just can't get out of gear too. So interesting to watch. I mean, yeah, as an anarchist, you should be watching this because you probably love it.
All right. On that note, I think we got to take a quick stop here because, again, going into the 2-segment aspect, it has been a longer show in that regard too. So we gotta put a nix on this. It has been fun. That Monday morning recording aspect has a little bit of a different tinge than when we do it on Sunday nights. So we'll hopefully keep that going. And until next time, I'm Brice Burge.
I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Shout out to everybody in Leicester City, the club. They're going through a hard time with that airplane crash right outside their stadium. Everybody here at Your Soccer Passport sends our thoughts for you guys. And all the best.
We're going to mix that up with a couple other things. There was a high school shooting this morning in Carolina that I personally, with my other show, I have an online radio show out of Brooklyn, and unfortunately, one of the people that I had on that show a couple weeks ago directly knew the high school student that was shot and in emergency surgery at the time of recording. And we also know that Mark Serber had kind of an emotional connection. Mark was on Your Soccer Passport World Cup edition. He had an emotional connection to the shooting in Pittsburgh at the synagogue there. So hug somebody and tell them you love them.
That's right.
Because I don't live close to any family members. So please hug somebody.
Yeah, that's
all
right.
We love you all. And until next time, this is Your Soccer Passport.